Linda. You can give the keyboard to me. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It's a two-part meeting this evening. The first part is the Board of School Directors public budget hearing. The purpose of the meeting is to conduct the business of the Gettysburg Area School District. Public comments welcome and issues will be referred to the appropriate board, committee, or administrator. Comments will be summarized in official board minutes, which will be available by contacting the business office. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Roll call, Ms. Collins. Tim is absent. He's excused. I'll update the board on a private matter during executive session. Julia Myers, I know you're here. Would you please come up? And what we're doing here, folks, is a presentation of the students' artwork to the board. It's a long-time tradition within the Gettysburg Area School District. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you the cream of the crop in creative and intellectual ingenuity this year at our buildings. I'm Julie Myers, co-chair of the art department. To start, I'd like to quote Kerry Washington. Art education must be a part of our education solution because it works for all students. Now, Kerry Washington points out what we see in our art classrooms every day. In a simple quote, and as a solution. Let me read her solution again. Because it works for all students. Art class works for all students. And that's what puts the public in public schools. All of our families, all of our community give us all of their best. And we have selected the best to share with you tonight. Before sharing, I would like to introduce our Gettysburg Area School District art teachers. If you would stand when I call your name, so that we can all put a face to the name. At the elementary campus in Lincoln, Lydia Wester-Stick, James Gettys, Megan Getz, Franklin Township, Christine Ecker. At the middle school, Lydia Johnson, and at the high school campus, Amy Drews, and myself, and Amy is out sick today. And so to acknowledge all of your work in taking in all of these students. At this time, I will hand it over to my co-chair, Christine Ecker. Christine?
Good evening. Thank you all for allowing us to make this special presentation again this year. We believe the true purpose of art education is not necessarily to shape and mold future professional artists, but to create more complete human beings that are capable of both critical thought and creative expression. For some of us, last year brought many challenges in delivering quality art education to our students. This year, the elementary art educators returned to the classrooms, and each level of learning exploded with productivity and creativity. Collectively, our art educators provided care, guidance, and instruction to nearly 2,000 students this past year. Our department was once again recognized as an outstanding visual arts community for 2021, one of only 20 schools in Pennsylvania to be awarded this endorsement. We saw the return of fine arts nights, our artist in residency projects, community and collegiate art shows, as well as the continuation of art at the Adams County Farmers Market that showcased the work created by the students at Lincoln. Our art educators worked tirelessly to create secure funding, coordinate collaborative community projects, and organize fundraisers that benefited local organizations, including SCAP and the SPCA. This past year, our students met and exceeded our expectations. Curious minds and creative hands produced quality pieces that we were all proud of. Some of our elementary students participated in design and ad through the Gettysburg Times, while select middle and high school students represented our district in the 2022 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, including one national gold medal winner. And now for the good stuff. So we're gonna start at the elementary level, and our first student is from James Geddes, and this is Elsie Miller. So Elsie is a third grader, and her piece was construction with mesh paper, paint, and embroidery. And Mrs. Getz is her art teacher. Next up, Vivian Liu. She's a second grader at Lincoln. And Ms. Wesker-Smith is her art teacher. This is a watercolor, and she named her piece The Night Sky. Next up is Vice Student Elaine He, and she is a second grader at Franklin Township. Her piece is quite big for her. This is a mixed media collage. Next up, middle school. Mrs. Johnson is the teacher. This is Adrienne Bloom Cahoot, or Cahoot. Okay. And she's not able to be here. She's an 8th grade student, and this is her pen and ink, and she named it An All-Consuming Time. We're going to move to the high school. So Mrs. Meyer's student, Juan Para Castro. He is a senior this year. This is his piece, Graphite and Clear Gesso on Paper, and the title is American Dream. And last one from the high school is Mrs. Dree's student, who's also sick. So we have my student, Taryn, is going to be holding this. Taryn was also a winner when you were in first or second grade? First grade. All right, so she's back holding a piece. This is a photograph from Katie Hansen, who is a junior, and the name of this is Soaked. Received lots of press. So this is a Scholastic Art Award winner, a regional gold key winner, a national gold medal. And Mrs. Dreves noted that Katie is her 7th national winner who will be recognized at Carnegie Hall. All right, and now for the big one. This is our superintendent's award. This is my student that I'm so proud of. He worked so hard on this piece. This is Zane Saltzman. He is my 4th grade student. This was blue and chalk pastel, and he just named it today a Happy Sea Turtle, and that's definitely a great title for his work. Huge thank you to our school board members, administrators that are here, our families and community for the support and recognizing the value and importance of arts education in our schools. Thank you so much.
Julie, before they leave, I think I noticed we're struggling to see some of them, so you may want, if you don't mind, if the students could let our audience see. So, Julie.
Yes.
I'm gonna allow a few minutes if some of the students or parents want to leave. They're welcome to stay for the budget hearing, the regular school board meeting. But I am gonna give you a safety net if you would like that. If you'd like to exit then.
All right.
Thank you again for coming out. Fantastic job.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, under number 4, the review of 2022-2023 proposed budget. Linda or Jason?
Slides from the second meeting. Comments to that.
Good evening. So, before you this evening, what was distributed for the board members this evening was the detail in terms of revenue and expenditures in accordance with the slides. I think the slides were before this last board meeting, but we went to have the official hearing. And of course, with that comes along, since budget planning dates, as of our last meeting, we had presented that some revenue changes to the current budget that equated to approved parcels increases into the book and the links. And so for
We increased revenue taxes in terms of the real estate parcel increases to the tune of about $216,316, and other local revenue of $19,440. The detailed revenue sheets that you have before you will outline each function with every category, local, state, and federal. And it provides you a 3-year actual and a budget to budget, so you can look as a comparison to them. We have not yet received our 2022 May assessment updates from the county. As soon as we do, we will again look at these revenues accordingly. The proposed final revenue, as you can see at the top of the slide, we have what our mill value is currently, and then also as 1.9% real estate tax, as this is proposed as preliminary at best. It is not a budget in final detail. This is proposed, and it was of course approved at the previous meeting. So 1.9% real estate tax increase would equate a local revenue source in total, and local includes real estate, earned income, delinquents, student fees, earnings and investments, gains and losses, and earned income, occupational assessment if there's any, and also some public utility realty tax. So local considers a number of arranged local items that comes out to be $46,798,860. State sources include revenue from basic ed subsidy, which is driven by the formula. It also includes tuition for our 1305 and 1306 students, along with vocational ed subsidy, migrant education, special education. We have pupil transportation subsidy. We have a rental and sinking fund payment subsidy, and this is a result from future debt that we had in place that we had in the pipeline for PlanCom. All of our projects moving forward will no longer be affected by PlanCom. So we also have in the state category medical and dental services subsidy, and of course the state property tax reduction allocation, and lastly our state share of PSERS and our state share of Social Security. State revenue comes to the tune of $19,605,049. And lastly, our federal sources make up pretty much our federal grant funds in terms of our Title I, II, III, IV, and we've also received some vocational subsidy and some JRTC funds for having the program here at Gettysburg. That comes to $978,589, and of course some other sources are pretty much the sale of fixed assets for about $7,273, for a total revenue of $67,389,771. On the bottom of the line, you'll see the contingencies from committed PSERS fund. Now, this is a fund balance that is designated for PSERS utilization, which means any expense, the PSERS rate is set year to year by the governing board from the PSERS. And of course, the increases year to year are continually go up. They have been increasing every year for a number of years, and it's expected to get to nearly 39 to 40% in the next 8 years. And so the district, prior to my attending and working with Gettysburg, had set aside some funds specifically to address the increase in PSERS. And so the increase year to year is what's utilized as a revenue source to offset that annual increase, which otherwise would be the expense, otherwise would call for additional expenditures as needed. So with those revenues that were set aside for PSERS added into all other revenues, we come for a total grant revenue of $67,875,648. This equates to a 3.3% increase over prior year's budget. Largely increases in real estate taxes for their growth and parcels, as well as earned income have surpassed those. This was where the majority of the increases came. State funding is relatively flat and or, the budgeter's government has not been settled yet. So of course, we are estimating right now is currently receiving current year funds because no guarantee has come out as to what the governor's budget will do for Gettysburg. And lastly, the federal sources will sometimes decrease year to year. You'll see a decrease here in federal sources simply because we took out ESSER funds in completeness from the prior year's budget. And there were some funds that were still in a residual for the 21-22 school year planning, but it was the ESSER one that had to come out. That's why you see the negative number in terms of the federal sources there. So overall, what was proposed at the last board meeting, which was a preliminary proposed budget of 1.9%, again, it comes to $67,875,648. So what changed on expenditures? Last time we presented the slides, very similar for those folks who were able to attend. We are proposing a 1-month funding holiday for our health insurance premiums, which means, of course, it's instead of 12 months payments, we're paying 11, with a goal to commit or assign those funds at the end of 23 if in fact we have materialized, we're able to keep those funds set aside. So in terms of technology, we are looking at reducing 51,000, which included bus access points and hotspots. We're looking to have ECF grants cover this, which is the Emergency Connectivity Grant. So we're thinking that if the grants come through, of course, we can reduce the general fund budget in terms of 51,000. Dr. Perrin can again cover the additional staff attrition listed there.
Right, so these are positions that would be open due to retirements or resignations, and they would not be filled. In order to get to 1.9% with the current revenues and expenditures, it would be 4 professional positions and then 3 classified positions.
Moving along, then, of course, we've estimated a reduction in utilities. We joint procure our utilities, and with doing so, setting the rates as well as improvements to the high school, we're thinking that we can materialize at least minimum of $20,000 in electric savings. The items below are items that were formerly a part of GWAC, and for folks maybe that do not know what GWAC is, that was the Gettysburg Warrior Athletic Fund that was in existence for a number of years that helped contribute to Gettysburg in terms of all the teams and all the support that they could provide our teams that the general fund budget couldn't support. So, of course, GWAC has entered into the dissolution process, and so some of the things that we felt that were important to maintain in the general fund we would like to continue simply because these are items that, we have set a precedence that we would continue to do and to support our teams and our players. Things such as, indices and plaques and banners, district banners, pins, varsity letters, and so forth. And the items that are listed there are all items that we currently are planning on taking care of the general fund. This isn't necessarily registered as a specific cut at this particular point in time, because we're looking to try to maintain all of these. And in doing that, we are trying to work collaboratively with GAF as a 501c3 organization to help establish, the correlation between Gettysburg and GAF to possibly look at some of the support in the future. But just in the process of establishing that relationship, it's very too early to determine that they're going to be able to provide $20,000 worth of support. This slide was just a representation of the items that GWAC did cover that we want to look at continuing within the general fund. Lastly, the budgetary expense additions, the only true additions that we had to the general fund process was looking into the school police force. And our district had presently about $100,000 in the budget to address the school resource officer that we collaboratively worked with the township. Since that agreement has ended, the district has decided to look into school police, so we're going to plan to use the $100,000 as well as additional $60,000 is needed for additional expenditures related to the program. So overall, we are considering approximately $931,000. And obviously the handout that was provided to the board, this is in summary form, and I apologize if it's very confusing for the three columns at the top. It's really truly only one, because the percent increase is relative to revenue, not necessarily expenditures, because the expenditures will stay the same. So, because you'll see all three of those columns are pretty much the same, and I just wanted to explain what that really was. So again, salaries on a 1.9% increase, as well as all the others, comes to tune about $25,236,987, and the benefits are $18,167,105 for overall. Nearly 70-some% of our budget is salary benefits, service industry that we are for $43,440,092. And overall, even with contractual increases and increases in our healthcare line for next year was considered to be 8%, and contractual increases were typically 2.925%, but with changes and retirements and so forth, that we are only actually materializing a 1.2% increase from year to year on this. The other items listed here are 300, which is purchased professional services of $5.6 million. Purchased professional services include items associated with the LIU, other professional development, security services, technological services, and majority of that, of course, is the IU's professional services. That number, as I mentioned, is $5.6 million. 400 purchased property services is typically anything with our property. This equates to items such as disposal, snow plowing, lawn care, laundry, electricity, to 622. We have water and sewer, some maintenance and repairs for buildings, equipment, and vehicles, maintenance and repairs for technology, as well as rentals and extermination. Typically, most things that are addressed with our facilities is in the category 400. 400 category comes to just slightly below $900,000 at $858,327. 500 other purchase of services. This is a large category here. Multiple things are factored into the 500 series. Items include such as the student transportation cost. I use transportation if there are any that are in need of doing addressing our children coming to and from. And of course, we have our property liability insurance, our fleet insurance, bond insurance, and any other insurance, casualty coverage that we have. This category also includes communications for the technology department, small advertising budget, printing and binding, which has dramatically dropped from the years before. Another large category in this area is tuition for charter schools and other local education agencies. We have our tuition for the tech, which is rather ACTI, and just tuition for PRII and other tuitions, such in terms of River Rock, that we provide and use services from. And of course, then we have our IU payments with withholding, which is typically our contribution to belong to the IU. That comes out to be $9.4 million, and shortly followed by that is our supplies. Now, most people think supplies are general classroom supplies, but it is much more. It is general classroom supplies, but it is also supplies for operation of the facilities. It also includes general classroom supplies in terms of art, music, every program that we have in terms of just general operating supplies are in this category. We also cover natural gas in this category, electricity and propane, and fuel oil, and gasoline, and diesel fuel. And the diesel fuel is for our operation, is not for the school buses themselves. We also have technology, hardware, software supplies, and support in this category. And published materials, which would be any textbooks and or consumable materials that we purchase for the district. And the total of supplies comes to just at $3 million. Our property and equipment, which is the 700 category, this includes all building and site improvements, replacement under new technology, replacement under new equipment for our facilities. So it's typically new and or replacement items. It comes into the $184,000. Moving along, our 800 category covers other objects, and typically the largest item in this category is considered to be principal on, correction, interest in all of our serial bonds, some dues and fees, and some other interest loans and financing purchases that we may have. We do have some small portion of refund of prior year receipts. This would be any type of receipt that we received and we need to refund for whatever reason, and also some student fees in the 800 category. With interest on our loans being the largest portion here, the 800 category is $1.8 million. And lastly, the 900 other financing sources. This equates to our bonds themselves and also our capital reserve transfer to fund our capital projects plan. Both of those items come to $6 million, and for total expenditures of $70,342,210. Over prior year's budget, it equates to 1.3% overall. When in fact the salary budgets was 1.2%, you can see several categories that have dropped in percentages, bringing down the total expenses from prior year's budget of only an increase of 1.3%. Are there any questions on terms from the board on the revenue and expense items that we have seen, and or questions and any of those items there that are listed there? I'm only prefacing that before I move into the next slide because there may be some more comments. This slide is all about fund balance, and fund balance has come under quite a bit of news lately, and just want to explain what fund balance is. Fund balance is your revenue minus your expenditures equals your fund balance. Now, there are several fund balances our district has. We have like 4 or 5 categories of fund balance. And let me just quickly explain those. So we have what's called a non-spendable fund balance. A non-spendable fund balance is not considered day-to-day operations, which is the unreserved fund balance. And when I speak of unreserved fund balance, it is the fund balance listed there as 6/30/2021, which is $6.6 million. The non-spendable fund balance are funds that are set aside that are not able to be spent. They are pretty much for inventory purposes and prepaid expenses that we have from year to year. Another category of fund balance is called restricted. Restricted funds are typically the funds set aside for a specific purpose. Our restricted funds include about, at the end of 21, about $3.6 million. This was set aside for LBT. We have to pay our claims, and this is a balance that is held at the trust for Gettysburg and their claims. So it is non-available funds that we're able to use.
LBT is health insurance?
Yes, Lincoln Benefit Trust is the holder. We have Highmark Blue Shield, and we have a high deductible plan. But Lincoln Benefit Trust is the trust that we work with that houses all of our claims and so forth. So correct, yes, it is. Sorry for the acronyms, but it's short for Lincoln Benefit Trust. That number, I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but it's $3.6 million that's currently held at the trust. Now, what those funds are used for at the trust are helping our ratings. So, we, in being a trust, we are responsible for every last claim made. So whether or not, the high deductible plan and the employee pays a portion of their high deductible, the district is still responsible for every last claim made. And so we can go claim from anywhere from $50 up to $1 million for catastrophic claims. But our district is responsible for paying those claims. Now, benefit of being in the trust is we share premiums on admin fees for all of the constituents that provide service to us. For example, Highmark Blue Shield has admin fees, and we are rated as a group with all the other districts on those fees, so we're receiving less of a fee rather than being out on our own. Very similar to other actuarial services that are being provided to the trust. We have Delta Dental as well as Vision. So those also have fees associated with those plans. And so, of course, being a trust, we'll be able to receive less of those fees. So most of our funds will account to actual claims themselves. So that is a restricted fund balance. The next fund balance we have is a committed fund balance. The committed fund balance are two categories. And it is not listed there, but I will share. And this is in our financial report. If you'd like some more information, I'll be provided to you. But our committed fund balance are funds that the district has set aside in a process. One being the FIP for the high school, and the second one being PSERS. So I said before that we had a committed fund balance of PSERS. Both of those combined at the end of 21 had $9.1 million. These are committed for a specific purpose. These are not used for general fund revenue minus expenditure, cutting the difference. These are specific to only be used for those areas. Now, of course, that could change. Committed is only done by board action. It is not something that is done by administrative. And we have plans in place to realize those funds over the next few years. So it is kind of like a future planning for a future need in that category. The last fund balance assignment called is unreserved. Excuse me, one more before I get there. The other one is called assigned. So you mentioned, I've talked before about assignments, and so when we went into this budget cycle, we decided that we were going to assign fund balance to help balance the 21-22 school year. And so we used the assignment to say, hey, we know that we are planning to use fund balance that we had set aside to balance the budget. And this has been an ongoing process year after year to address the difference between revenue and expenditures. That assignment at the end of June of 21 was $3.7 million. That assignment that has maximized is not to be considered to use for the following budget cycle, because you're planning to use that, we are planning to use it in the 21-22 school year. Now, of course, when the audit is finalized, we will know what the final fund balance is, and only at that time, because at the end of the year, there are a lot of accruals. Our teaching salaries, for example, are accruals done over the summer months. They start in August, and our accrual goes to August, to September, basically. So we account for the salaries for that specific year, no matter how they were paid, whether it was a lump sum or whether it was a bi-weekly pay, separated out for so many weeks. But we still have to account for that. There's other transactions that we have to account for, uncollectible real estate, 30, 60, 90-day rules. And there's other expenditures, and I will say that we need to calculate and look at deeply is because of ESSER. So if we received ESSER revenue, for example, and we've expended revenue, it should be revenue in, expenditures out, zero. But what happens with the new ESSER dollars, the influx of funds that we had, we can only show in our accrual financial statements that revenue equals expenditures. So whatever revenue we receive is what our expenditures need to be, and any difference needs to be adjusted. Likewise, for expenditures, we expended more in expenses versus the revenue. We have to have an adjusting item in our fund balance. So there's a lot of transactions that happen between year end and or during the financial review of our audit that it's a little hard to project exactly use thereof and or excess available. So in budget planning time, we do not account for current year assignment of funds. Last fund balance is the unassigned. This is your everything else, and this is available for resources to spend, such as revenue minus expenditures equals your fund balance. At the end of June, that number was $6.68 million. So what we typically will do is take the end of fund balance, $6.6 million, add the proposed revenue, $67.3 million, add the PCERS proposed of $485,000, less your expenditures budget of $70,342,000. So it allows us to have use of fund balance to keep a 6% fund balance as according to policy. We are permitted to use 2.46 in fund balance, which will keep our reserve at a 6% level of $4.2 million. And that is the 1.9% tax increase column as it stands presently. So, we are permitted by Act 1 to go to 4%, but I don't believe the administration under the board is considering to go to 4% at this particular point. But, obviously to get to 0% tax increase, we would either need to find more revenue or less expenditures in the tune of $626,000 to keep our fund balance at 6%, using the same percent of fund balance that is available for us to use. I know we mentioned in the previous meeting that where do we find $626,000? Very good question. We're still looking at some of the revenues. Once the assessment office comes in with updates, we will have to back out some of the estimates that we made in some of the parcel increases. Once we get those numbers, at this particular point, we are waiting until that report comes in so we can make that determination. But large scale things, $626,000 is still a lot of money. And then previously I mentioned, what could be done for that. Not that something that we want to do because it addresses the educational footprint of the Kingsbury School District. But the only item that comes, and I said this before the previous meeting, that comes to that magnitude is taking full day kindergarten to half day. A very difficult decision to do because it's, again, addressing the footprint and not necessarily good for education. But this is the overall fund balance situation, which was, of course, shared in the previous meeting. Moving along, this slide just basically shows our mill rate since 5.6 increase in terms of mill rate. What we do not see here is what the index was, because I believe there was only 1 or 2 years that we were at or above the index. Everything else has been below the permitted index that PDE has allowed for us to go. Then, of course, here's the tech village impact. In general, the summary is in Gettysburg, the average market assessed value on a home is $260,296. At 1.9%, we'd be looking at an additional 0.211 mils on top of 11.1057 mils. This equates to a $54.92 increase annually. And of course, monthly is something smaller than that. But this is just an example consideration for 1.9. This is not a final number by any means, but this is just giving you an example to look at in terms of what the increase may look like for you. Lastly, again, this was proposed as the hearing. Many of the information presented this evening is the same as the last meeting. We are looking to still make some changes between now, but we are looking to move, hopefully, recommend the board adoption June 6th, meeting all of our advertising requirements and all the timelines that we have in place to get everything on board. If we happen to need more time, we will have to either advertise and or set an additional date outside of the next meeting in order to meet the state guidelines of having a budget approved on June 30th. Any questions?
I think that, as Belinda mentioned, so we'll take the next 3 weeks basically and continue to work with budget heads to see if there are additional savings looking at areas such as, say, district-supported field trips, those kinds of things. Taking a look at those areas, and also trying to see if the last week of the county helps us revenue-wise. Overall, I'd like to, the goal would be hopefully to try to reduce the number a little bit, but also try to retain a couple of the professional positions that are listed in the cuts. That's kind of where we are currently. Busy 3 weeks.
Dr. Perrin, Mrs. Wallen, is there any chance, I'm not too optimistic, that we'll know the state contribution by the time we have to make our final decision on June 6th? I know from everything I've read, the state has a considerable amount of a surplus, and I think the governor is recommending that more funds come to the schools, but obviously you can't count on that.
Right, and it's only helpful, the state increases are only helpful if their increases to basic ed, and they're there to fall, like, it's not helpful to have say grants from the state that are going to run out the following year. Unless the state's going to increase basic ed, it's not really helpful, and it's not easy to project there. I will say that the other thing that we're currently working towards, and I think we're making some progress, is the budget resolution that the board passed, staying within the 6 to 8 point fund balance, and one of the goals over a multi-year period was to get to where revenues equal expenditures. So for this current year's budget, 21-22 school year budget, we needed 3.7 million of fund balance that budget. We're proposing of using about 2.4. So we're headed in the right direction in terms of reducing that gap between revenues and expenditures. Just something else that I wanted to point out, because folks might be thinking about it in terms of the resolution.
My apologies if this was answered before. I did miss the last school board meeting. The 7 positions, we're a medium-sized school district, 7 full-time positions. I think it was 4 professional, 3 classified staff. That's a pretty big hit to a medium-sized school. Dr. Perry, either you or Dr. Lay or any other school leader that's here, I'd be interested to learn a little bit more about the impact of that. Obviously, it's not going to be a positive impact, and my hope is that those kids that are especially marginal learners or that need some extra help and so on, they're not going to suffer too much, or they're not going to lose any programs or great services that we've been able to and fortunate to offer. I'm glad we're not furloughing anyone. It's that we could do it through attrition, but still, it's got to have an impact.
Yeah, we in the last meeting we just talked in general about anytime we reduce professional positions, it's due to folks leaving, and so it's whatever they happen to be certified in. It's not something that you choose. What certification areas you can fill by attrition. So it's whatever those happen to be. So it's different for each organizational level. Generally, if you reduce professional positions, say at the elementary, Dr. Moore, as you're aware, you're basically dealing with just some class size increases there. Middle school is a little bit more difficult. They're scheduled to be a team approach, which is kind of the foundation of middle schools. So you can't just like pull a piece out of a team. So that becomes more of a challenge. The high school level, it could be a combination of things. It could be class sizes in whatever the content area of the folks leaving. It could be scheduling issues for high school kids. You start to create more singleton courses that only meet once. Folks that have to kind of make some choices about what their priority is versus getting, say, 2 of the courses that they wanted. And being able to put the master schedule together, which is Mr. Lusk's job. So the challenge is also just the time of year. Generally, you're trying to run your schedule about right now. So with these kind of things being on hold, he's probably running 4 scenarios because the master schedule will be different for the high school depending upon how many positions we can recoup by the time we get to the final budget. And if I know that's been a significant challenge for him. So if you want to add anything to what I shared, Jeremy, Mr. Watson.
And I explained a little bit about this the last time we met, but for those that weren't here, or for those that just need a refresher, you know, in my building, we had retirements for you know, the folks that were, the positions we're looking at that are kind of open through attrition. We have a math teacher, we have a safety ed PE teacher, and we have a family and consumer science teacher who also taught some history courses. So that's what I'm looking at trying to deal with as I build a master schedule. And as Dr. Perrin said, I'm looking at several different scenarios in terms of dealing with that, because right now the demand, as I explained a couple of meetings back, for math is up. We're scheduled to teach more math courses than we've taught in any recent year. And as the data shows that we reviewed a couple of meetings ago, we have math challenges to overcome. I've made a schedule without that math teacher, but I've had to borrow from science because we, you know, fortunately for flexibility, we have some teachers who are dual certified in a couple of different subjects. So, you know, I have a version of a schedule that steals from the science department, and you know, now a science teacher that should be teaching physics in my mind to more students, so they're more mechanically inclined and can perform some of the jobs that I know are out there, even in this own county. You know, that teacher is going to teach several sections of geometry for the first time ever. So it means a lot of change. You know, it's one of those things I said it's doable. Just don't really like how it looks. I mean, I understand the impact on kids. You know, it can be done. The question is, should it be done? And that's not really up to me to decide. It's up to me to just deal with. As far as some of the other positions, if I had to, you know, not fill a PE safety ed, well, I'd probably have to go back to the drawing board in some ways and wreck my schedule and rebuild it. I'd probably have to cut a position somewhere else, potentially tech ed, which I don't care to do, but might need to do to move a teacher into driver's ed. You know, there's possibilities. I'm not going to just shoot from the hip and try and figure that out without knowing exactly what I need to figure out. I have a schedule built as of 2 days ago, kind of in a holding pattern, because once we get our schedule to a certain point, because of all the singletons and everything that we try to do for kids, there's a lot of hand manipulation from our counselors. You know, they go through every schedule one by one and adjust those schedules to get the kids the best schedule they can get based on what the kids want. You know, that's takes a lot of work. The machines can only process things so much and take it so far before we jump in and have to figure out the rest. And there's a lot of variables in play right now that make that difficult to do. So we're kind of sitting in a holding pattern. We'll try and do as much as we can, a couple of different scenarios at one time, which isn't easy, but that's kind of what we're up to. I'll explain, you know, another position. We have a family and consumer science and history position, and that, you know, we're also talking about required courses that every student, in terms of policy, needs to take. So just kind of deciding, you know, to change some of those things. There's a domino effect that is, again, tricky to deal with. I know there's probably a lot of questions in there, but it's hard to explain it all without taking 2 hours.
Thank you.
Okay, so can I ask you a question? Sorry guys, I'm gonna take a little bit, so give me a minute here. So Belinda, when you were going over your presentation, I was taking notes and I have a couple questions. So first of all, you said the Peaser's rate is set by the Peaser's board. Who's the Peaser's board?
It's adopted by, and it has several different members from across the state.
They're not like,
It's not any of our
okay.
board members or teachers.
Legislature?
And that, there is a specific board by PCERS, and it's just like any other board, where people can, put their name on a ballot and, move forward the process. When those vacancies come up, then they could provide, names for there. Without going to the PCERS website, I couldn't tell you who's sitting on the board, but I know it's
I'm
some,
just, this is the first I'm hearing
I
there's
know-
a teacher's board.
it is, and so they do a lot of, the board setting those particular rates. That board is made up of professional staff, teachers across the state, and superintendents, school board members. I'm not quite sure, but I think the board is like 11 or 15 in count, but, yeah, on the website will list the board members, but there is a board. They set the rate annually every December.
Okay. So we have a non-spendable fund account, which is for the LBT, that's 3.6 million, right? And then you said we have a committed fund balance, which is funds that we set aside for PSERS and, did you say?
So, no, non-spendable is considered our inventory and our prepaid expenses,
Right,
okay? Restricted is the LBT,
okay.
committed is the FIP, high school, and also the PSERS, that's correct.
And what's FIP stand for?
Facility improvement projects.
Okay, and there's
So
nine.
it was basically the fund that the district started many years back, so that when the borrowing would occur on bigger projects like the high school, that there would be money from the general fund that would go into that each year, so that the projects didn't impact the regular general fund district budget. So it was almost like, kind of like prepaying PSERS, it was like prepaying, interest payments on debt service, I guess is how I would explain it right now.
Right, and so for the wraparound debt we have, then of course we pull from these funds any increases rather than addressing the increases in the general fund.
And there's $9 million in there.
Between both of those, yes.
And then the assigned fund balance, there's $3.7 million in there.
That's correct, and that was for the budget shortfall for this current year.
Okay. Where do the funds come from that fill these buckets?
So I believe the LBT is something that is, an audit number that we adjust to every year. An audit is done at Lincoln Benefit Trust.
No, I understand, but I'm saying like,
It's a couple different scenarios for each one. So it's not just general fund supporting it. So for example, the non-spendable fund balance, inventory and prepaid expenses happen every year, they're adjusted every year. The restricted fund balance, which was the LBT, once the audit is done at LBT, revenue minus expenditures equals fund balance, that is our reserve there, so that can be adjusted every year. The committed fund balance, the PSERS, that is the number that the board has in the past set amount of money aside, and then we use, for the increase, just the increase year to year, we'll use that. The capital items, the FIP for the high school and the other projects, that was also money that the board had set aside to address the debt funding shortfall to the future and or for future projects. So the committed funds were set by the board. The committed funds can only be undone by the board. And the assigned fund balance, which is the budget shortfall, can be adopted by the board as well, but an assignment is typically done in the course of annual operations. Did that answer your question?
it did, mostly. I'm just gonna ask the question. So, what you're telling me is you're pretty sure that we're gonna get $67 million in revenue. That's you're pretty sure that we're looking at about 67 million, right?
In terms of this budget,
Yes.
yes.
So why aren't we building our budget off of what that revenue is? It's almost like we're doing this backwards.
Yes.
in
And
turn,
I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but it don't, like, I know that my paychecks are gonna be X number of dollars. And in order for me to not go into huge amounts of debt, I have to spend what my paycheck is. So we know what our revenue is. So why can't we build a budget off of what our revenue is?
and we do for the known items that we have. Like, we know at a specific point in time, here's our assessment. Our assessment times our mill rate equals the tax revenue. We receive reports from York Area Tax Bureau. We know at a specific point in time, this is the tax revenue that's received by the York Area Tax Bureau for the half of Gettysburg. So we know what that is. So as we go along, we have a better picture of when these numbers are coming out that are available. I'm gonna go back years. I've been in this business now for too many months. But anyway, at one point in time, you used to build your revenue budget and then you do your expenditure budget. That's not the way it is anymore. You build your expense budget and then you look at your revenue budget, because your expenses you're known. You're typically more known with your expenses than you are your revenue. One, the state is never a guarantee that you're going to get those funds. So you're estimating what the state is going to give us is the same as what it currently is. We don't even know if we're going to get those current year funds. We put a budget in for it, which was an increase over our actual, but there's no guarantee because they make payments periodically. And so until we are done in June, do we know if we've got fully funded those amounts? Some of the other areas of state money, you know, transportation subsidy, Social Security subsidy, and PESER subsidy. Typically, at this time of year, the PDE will send out a notice saying, hey, we're going to fund you, but not by the end of June. We're going to fund you in the next quarter. So we have to carry that as an anticipated revenue. So we do the very best we can with what we have. We know for certain what our expenditures are. Do we have a lot of discretionary funds? No. Majority of our budget is either contractual, personnel related, benefit related, all personnel. You're less than 3% maximum discretionary. But in order to address those discretionary funds, you have to make major changes in other areas. It's not simply as, hey, I'm going to reduce this and this without affecting programs. For example, we say, no field trips. Well, that affects how the schools operate in terms of, what is curriculum related, what is, fundraiser related, what is, if the district's not supporting that, then there's other means to go about trying to give those kids the same level of benefit as what they had before.
Right, and one of the ideas of the budget resolution was to take a pretty significant gap between revenue and expenditures and close that on a yearly basis to try to get to where you're talking about where revenues equal expenditures, but the number's too large to take that fight in 1 year without really changing what we do for kids in this district.
But it doesn't sound like it's ever going to change. And if we keep saying, well, these are what our expenditures are and this is what we need to come up with, then it's never going to change. I mean, it's almost like we have to sit here and say, this is what we have to play with, this is what we have to work with. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but you guys are in the six-figure club, you're going to have to figure this out.
Right, it's so this current year was the gap was 3.7. If we follow through with the budget similar to the one that Lauren presented, it would be 2.4. So the goal is to bring that closer to zero every year without affecting programs for kids.
And I don't understand how you can do that if we keep saying these are our expenses and this is our revenue, because there's no guarantee your revenue is going to change or going to increase, but we know your expenses are going to increase. That's a given, because we're a people-heavy business, and we even said we're going to have expenses from PESERs that are going to go up 38%. So we know expenses are going to go up.
Yeah, like 1.2% or 1.3% is actually a small increase for a school district. It basically means that we're controlling all the costs that aren't benefit related.
So can we as a board sit here and say that maybe we need to look at some of like the committed fund balance for the FIP and the teachers and maybe, I mean, especially maybe the FIP, although I was just at high school on Sunday and the rich living. And that needs to be addressed.
You want to keep your debt service payments
Yeah.
similar. Maybe you can, you know, you don't want to decrease the debt service. Basically, when you start getting into utilizing things like, say, going in and rating the Peasers account,
I'm not saying
all that's
no, I don't want to rate it because I understand that we're putting money aside for future expenses. I get that, but are we putting too much money aside?
Well,
Are we not putting enough aside?
I wish we were still.
yeah.
I wish right now we were sitting there saying, we have a balanced budget. We're going to put $2 million into Peasers, and like that's where I'd like to be, but we're not.
We're using those funds, we're not putting funds into those areas to use for a later point. Right now, we're at the point where we're drawing them down and using them. So we're not stockpiling any longer. We are using them and moving along. So eventually, those funds will be used up for the course of operations, and no new funds are going to be created for that. So that's the goal of the 5-year project, 5-year budget planning is to get our revenues and expenditures to equal, so there is no reliance on any fund balance, that we are at the point where we're sustaining without reliance on anything.
Yeah, we haven't actually put money into the Peasers account since prior to, I came in 17, 18, so my first budget I would have worked on with the board would have been 18, 19. So it's well before that, right, Tom, that all the pre-funding for Peasers was done. So at least over these past 4 or 5 years, we haven't stuck any extra money into Peasers. The only thing that we've done is continue to fund the FIP and continue to utilize fund balance to plug the gap between revenues and expenditures on a yearly basis.
Question. The last time we met, 2 things that jumped out at me were the tuition that we're paying. That's a huge number, right? And the mental health aspect. Those numbers really jumped out at me as being issues. With the mental health side of things, I understand it's important, but like you brought up trauma or whatever it was last time, there was one aspect that they get this additional service that we pay for. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's the way I understood it. How much total are we paying for that? I'm just curious, because I know the state funds a lot of this stuff outside of the school system.
I mean, it depends, because if you look at, say, a topic that's broad, like mental health, a lot of times that topic isn't even just mental health. It's really like mental health and behavior. So you start straddling multiple areas. So, for instance, like we wouldn't have, say, a budget head that would oversee funds for mental health. What you would see in the school district is mental health accounts across kind of multiple budget heads. So we would have mental health resources for students that also serve as behavior management services for kids. So the funding for those would be anything from there'd be some that would be funded by the general fund from the district, and that's generally positions, guidance counselors, those types of things. We have grants that we apply for that fund, say like ESSER money. So there are some like extra layers of things that we put in while ESSER is available, knowing that when ESSER disappears, that those extra layers will disappear unless a decision's made 2 years down the road to provide money from the general fund to keep those things going. So there's state money available for some things. Some of the mental health spending is state required, such as student assistance programs. We fund those out of the general fund, I believe off the top of my head, going from just memory at this point, from looking at various budgets. But generally the highest costs in that realm would be different positions that we have that assist with those programs, whether it be a guidance counselor or a school psychologist or maybe a social worker. And they might not be doing mental health with students, but they might be connecting families with mental health providers. And then sometimes even those families, health insurance companies are actually what pick up the cost for some of those. So it's kind of a combination of lots of different ways that those things are paid for. And some of those, if you look at, say, like regular education, you can have a combination to where they are, say, mental health and behavior components, and you're basically supporting any student in the classroom. And then you have some of those mental health components that might be a part of the whole special education world, where it's like emotional support classes that you have as a district, or emotional support classes that you're funding through the intermediate unit. So it's never as clean as say like a budget for, say, mental health. It's always kind of, I'm not sure if I explained it well enough, but it's kind of it spirals through lots of different budgets, because the elementary is going to have some mental health support, student services budget's going to have some mental health support, special education is going to have some mental health support, Mr. Lusk is going to have some mental health support at the high school. So it's like, it's little pieces in everybody's budget.
I have a question. So I was doing a little digging around and looking at other schools' preliminary budgets just to see where we stood. And one thing struck me, I thought was kind of odd. So we have roughly $72 million budget, proposed budget. And for a school that has a $32 million proposed budget, their funds that they get or proposing to get and have gotten for the past couple of years in that zone are almost half of their total budget. So I'm trying to figure out, and I'm going to give you the example. So if their federal resources were like 1.2 million. Now, granted, some of that might be some kind of extra money on the federal end of it, I got that. But on the state end of it, when you're getting $13 million from the federal state government, and then you only have to take in 17 million from your local, and here we're taking in 50-some million from the local, and the state's only giving us 19. Why is there such a disparity?
It's a state calculation, so we would agree.
If you're going to give one school district a percentage of their total budget, you should give every school the same percentage for their budget. That would make sense.
I agree. The calculation involved there involves a variable called aid ratio, which is a number that indicates wealth of district. And so when that's put into the calculation, the state portion of a district's budget goes up significantly the less wealthy a district is. So the wealthier, quote unquote, based on the aid ratio, the wealthier your district is, the more significant you're relying on your local taxpayers to support the costs of your public schools. So you'll read, at times you'll read things like, and you always get both sides of the fence politically, of course, but Pennsylvania, in terms of state funding into the school districts, is out of the 50 states is pretty low. And that puts a lot of the burden back on our local residents and local taxpayers. So the more that the state provides, obviously, the more we can provide, local taxpayers. I've been doing public school now for about 29 years waiting for funding reform. So, unfortunately, those aren't decisions we get to make, at this level. It's the system we have, and we're trying to operate within the system we have. Understanding that we rely heavily on our local community, and doing the very, very best that we can within that for our kids in our schools. But so what you're pointing out is why there are currently lawsuits. There are always lawsuits going on in the state regarding school funding. I think there's one right now with PARS and a couple of the more rural districts and some of the urban districts, because you see kind of the same thing with urban districts that you see with the more rural districts. A large percentage of state share. There are certainly states that the state completely provides the funds for public schools. I know that my niece goes to school in Arkansas, and they're completely state funded. You pay a different way. Other things go up, whether it's a higher sales tax, higher transfer, higher transfer tax, or taxing things that we don't tax in Pennsylvania. So just every state does it a little bit differently, but we have to work within the rules that we have currently. But I would certainly be fine with the state providing 100% of what we need, and the taxpayers not. But that's just not where we're at.
I just found that really interesting, and kind of didn't take basic math to sort of enter the number in my head. Wait a minute. That and this district is also different than a lot of districts in the state. That 100% of the school district, about, and I'm just using a rough number because I don't did the study, but about 50% of the property pays 100% of the taxes, because we do have national parks and national forests and colleges and churches and whatever, and you take into consideration 50% of the property pays all the school taxes, where in some other districts 100% of the property pays 100% of taxes, or close thereof. So it is a big disparity for this district, and then to see that we're getting shorted in a sense on the state portion when other places are getting 100% of their property taxes, and we're only using 50% of our property to fund our school, and we're only getting that small disparity of funds. It's just something I wanted to question and point out.
Yeah, it certainly impacts different communities, differently. But I dealt with the same thing in my last district in State College. The biggest property owner was Penn State University, and same kind of thing. The more properties they bought, less taxes, and then everybody else's that had property taxes went up.
Can we look about grant money for the SRO? I know the PDE offers money through state schools, and I know it's already done for this year, but then we can apply for it for 22-23.
We will look at PCCD and see if there's any say school grant money available through that to help fund the SRO program, school police program, I should say.
Any additional questions from board members? Moving forward, citizens' participation. Al?
Thank you, President Hassinger, and good evening, everyone. We have 4 people that have asked to address the board this evening. We'll start with Mr. Bob Stillwell.
Thank you, Dr. Moyer. President, apparently certainly some of the board members may have had some ruffled feathers over my recent editorial. I'm sorry if it offended any of you, no offense was intended. But if there was anything that I said that was not true, or was otherwise perceived a personal attack, I hope you'll contact me to discuss it. I'm always available to talk about the Gettysburg Area School District budget. I believe in providing a quality education to our youth. As citizens of Pennsylvania and the United States, is our civic duty. Even for those like me that have no students in school. In this state, we do that partly with property taxes. I want to make myself perfectly clear. I am not opposed to property tax increases when the administration can clearly demonstrate that they have trimmed all unnecessary expenses, have accurately determined revenues, and there is not ample reserve funding to balance the budget. That has not happened in prior years, and I believe it is not happening now. After reviewing in depth the school district's 5 prior yearly budget submissions to Harrisburg and all of the prior yearly audits that are available, it is my opinion that this school district has been, and still likely is, awash with cash. Thus, it is my opinion that there is no need to either cut proposed expenses nor raise property taxes at this time. I will tell you why. This is a PDE 2028 that contains the final approved budget for the school district. Okay? The district superintendent, budget director, and the board president must sign their names to this document and transmit it to Harrisburg every year, certifying that the approved budget is accurate and reflects the true needs of the school district. One of the certifications that the superintendent makes is that the unassigned fund balance will be below the maximum allowable limit of 8% of expenses, which would be now about $5.7 million for the Gettysburg Area School District. The declaration is the legal basis that allows the school district to raise property taxes. If it were predicted to be above 8%, it would be illegal to raise taxes. For example, take the declaration for the 2018-19 school year. It stated that the beginning unassigned fund balance available was $8.6 million. But Dr. Perrin certified that the ending unassigned fund balance would be just $4.9 million, low enough for him to request a tax increase, which he got. Presumably, the reduction in the fund balance would be used to backfill the predicted funding shortfall. Surprisingly, the following year's PDE 2028 for school year 2019-20 revealed a starting fund balance of $9.1 million. Not only was the fund balance not reduced, it actually grew. Yet again, Dr. Perrin certified that the balance at the end of that year would truly be reduced to $4.2 million, and another tax increase request was made, which he got. Next year, same story. The 2028 for school year 2021 once again showed the beginning fund balance increased to $9.7 million, a far cry from the $4.2 million he predicted. Is this legal? Every year, the district assures the Pennsylvania Department of Education that the fund balance would be brought within legal limits, which permits a request for a tax increase. Yet every subsequent year, the claimed reduction is not realized. The same was true for the current 21-22 year, when the predicted balance would be just $3.8 million, but turned out to be $8.1 million. This famous Yankee catcher once said, "This feels like deja vu all over again, and again, and again." So how has it been possible for 5 consecutive years to claim so much of the unassigned fund would be needed to balance the budget, only to discover year after year that was not true? What was used to backfill those budget shortfalls, if not the unassigned reserves? The answer is nothing. Apparently, there never was a budget shortfall. How do I know this? Read the audits. If you pay for these audits, you should read them too. when comparing the district's stated revenue projections and stated expenditure needs drawn from the 2028s at the beginning of the year to the corresponding actual revenue and expenditures from the audits at the end of the year, it is revealed that year after year, for at least the last 4 available audits, the school district ended each of those years with anywhere from $5.1 to $7 million left over. What does that mean? To me, it says that for each of those years, there was in fact no budget shortfall to begin with. No wonder the unassigned fund continued to remain at or near $9 million for the past 5 years. So here you are, faced with another conundrum about what to believe. Had the budget office been providing accurate, periodic, year-to-date accountings of revenue and expenses, you would at least have a fair shot at understanding the actual fiscal need going into next year. But to my knowledge, they have not. So you're left to wonder, how much of a surplus will result from the current year that we're just finishing? And how much might be built into the present proposal for the next? And even if the $6.6 million that Ms. Wallen shows as the present unassigned fund balance is accurate, I would at least say they're moving in the right direction. But it's still $1 million above the legal maximum and $2.4 million above the minimum. So why the tax increase request for $570,000? Even if a true shortfall actually did arise between revenues and expenditures, given the surpluses this administration has been running, there is no doubt ample room to make modest cuts to help the taxpayers in this simple economy exist. And there is certainly ample unassigned fund reserves to fill any shortfall that's left. Again, I assert there is no basis to be found for a property tax increase. Of course, you could make the go along to get along choice of last year and just adopt an unsubstantiated tax increase, but with rate inflation running at 8.5% and a gallon of gas passing north of $4.50, it really just doesn't seem like a great time to poke the taxpayers in the eye. I will leave you with an excerpt from a recent study about Pennsylvania school boards. Quote, I believe this study supports the practice and use of multi-year budget projections in planning and execution. No longer is it simply good enough to look into the next year or over the next 3 years for budget planning. It is imperative that districts look at their budget planning for at least 5 years and perhaps more, as individual districts plan to balance their revenues and expenditures in the years that come. Fund balances can be used in conjunction with revenues to meet current and future liabilities. So understanding a district's complete revenue and expenditure picture requires understanding how reserve fund balance monies are also utilized. Sound like good advice? I'm sure Dr. Perrin does. It's a quote from his doctoral dissertation in educational leadership at Penn State. I hope this board and he will take his good advice and work together to get future budgets better balanced. As always, thank you for the board's time, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for quoting from Dr. Perrin's dissertation. I'm impressed. David Birdwell.
Good evening. Does this work? Good evening. My name is David Birdwell, and I live at 4 Banner Court here in Gettysburg. I last addressed this board 16 years ago. I don't normally speak at these meetings, but tonight I feel compelled to do so. I am here to comment on the budget and the budget process itself. I rise tonight to make sure that the members of this board are aware of all of the options open to you concerning this budget. Frankly, I believe that you have more options than those put before you by the business manager. A lady whom I find to be honest, kind, intelligent, highly educated, hardworking, and highly experienced. She's a professional who's done a good job of providing you with the information she was directed to provide to you. However, despite all of our efforts today, we find ourselves in exactly the same position we were in this time last year. I remember where we were last year because I was here. Because of that, tonight, I propose a change to how we conduct business as usual so that we do not find ourselves in the same position next year. From the superintendent on down, these administrators are your employees, required to follow the directions you provide. You, not they, call the shots. Specifically, I propose that you direct the business manager to continue to produce 3 budgets each year, but with the difference being that each of these 3 new budgets will endorse a 0 tax increase option. You know, Michelle Smyers got it right this evening. She said, we have this amount of money to work with, make it work. But Linda, we don't start with our expenses when we run our homes. We start with the money that we have available to us and trim our expenses so that we don't exceed what we income. That's how we all run our homes. That's how we need to run the school district. Each of these 3 new budgets that you direct she provide to you will endorse a 0% tax increase. The difference is that they all work within the means that we have. It has become altogether too easy for this board to simply go back and say, well, because we start with our expenses, instead of starting with the money that the taxpayers have given you, we need to go back and ask them for more. That dog don't hunt, not no more. I want you making the decisions on where budget cuts are to be made, not administrators. One option might be to meet at least quarterly, perhaps more often, to discuss budget events, a budget process, to require that of your budget manager, just to keep the budget processing on track. That's exactly what we do in the military. My neighbor and good friend Bob Stillwell and I have looked at these numbers. The money is there. Trust us. The business manager knows where budget cuts may be padded for a variety of different reasons, and she knows where expenses can be trimmed without sacrificing the quality of either the education or the services that we provide to the community. She is the single person closest to the issue of saving money. But her job requirements, that is the things that you require from her, must change. That may require a rewrite of her job description. And if that's the case, so be it. Others may need to have their job descriptions rewritten as well. Additionally, you may need to revisit the collective bargaining agreement, folks, in the immediate future, especially given the enormous, almost unbelievable recent increases in healthcare costs have laid on the process. Quite frankly, I don't see any way around it. And 27 credit cards? Really? Look, we simply can no longer continue with the same business practices each year after year, each year expecting a different outcome. Before I leave, I want to appeal to you concerning the way you address each other. I know each one of you. I genuinely like each one of you. Oh, I even like Jeremy. My point is that each of you deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. None of you are paid for your work here, a notion that I intensely dislike. But it remains a truth. Things may be expensive, but it costs you nothing to be kind to each other. Nor would I add, being kind a sign of weakness. In fact, being kind to those who don't share your particular opinions is a direct reflection of your individual confidence and strength. You may not agree with each other as a board member, but you do owe him or her respect of their position on this bed board merits. You are put here for a reason, and quality people should labor to wrestle with thoughts and ideas, not with each other. We, the people, want you to function as a cooperative team of elected professionals. You were put here as a team to effect changes, and now is the time to effect that change. Let that change start tonight. There is absolutely no appetite in this community for an increase in property taxes. I urge you to say no to the proposed budget increases and instead approve the zero tax increase option. I say that again. The money is there to cover a 0% tax increase. There is little to no appetite, and there's no real reason to wait. Why wait until June the 6th? Why not go ahead and vote tonight on a zero tax increase? Protect our credit rating by letting the world know in the strongest possible language that from this day forward, Gettysburg Area School District intends to live within its means, just like each one of us does now.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Next, we have Ann Peel. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
It's Petey. Petey.
Ann Peedy. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. Well, I want to thank the board tonight for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I appreciated the comments tonight and all the effort that has gone into explaining to us the budget for Gettysburg. I'm here to represent the Adams County Council of Republican Women. And we're very concerned that you're considering raising school property taxes by 1.9%. The Adams County voters elected you to the board to address educational challenges and to make good, sound financial decisions. The taxpayers are weary of seeing their school property taxes increase almost every year. We understand that Dr. Perrin, Gettysburg's area school district superintendent, submits the yearly budget request for approval by the board. We expect you to review each line item and make recommendations for reductions. And I want to repeat that word. You've heard that tonight many times. We mean reductions. I'm a fourth grade school teacher. I've taught for 34 years in a huge county, in Fairfax County, Virginia. And I can tell you that the classroom, the school, the county has room for reductions. And they did that in Fairfax County, and we can do that here. You are responsible for ensuring that the budget is not padded and that it fits the mandatory needs of the school district without unnecessary burden on taxpayers. Before any taxes are increased, we suggest that Dr. Perrin review the budget and begin recommendations in areas that are not mandatory. The unassigned line item is the reserve for unexpected changes to either revenue or expenses. The funds in this line item appear to exceed the 8% allowed by law for reserve funds at the end of the school year.
Doing a better job of managing this line item is another source of funds that can address shortfalls without raising taxes. Ms. Warren, the business manager, should be required to provide a monthly report that shows the approved budget by line item versus actual expended to date. This is basic financial management and is done by virtually every business. The report needs to be made available on the school district website. This information is available only after the annual audit as the district's fiscal year has ended. Board members and taxpayers should be able to review and question the actuals versus approved budget throughout the fiscal year. Knowing that the school district's student population is decreasing and that this trend is expected to continue, we would like to see an analysis showing the projected teacher-to-student ratio. We would also like to see the hiring of administration positions for the last 5 years by position, by school. We also believe that any negotiations that the superintendent makes, such as with the teachers union, would be briefed to the board and require the board's approval. This is not happening, it should. The Adams County Council of Republican Women are not pleased with the proposed 1.9% tax increase. We worked very hard during the election to have the school board seated with concerned, common sense conservatives who could balance the needs of the students, teachers, parents, and taxpayers. Our organization supports a board that strives to meet the educational needs of our youth while approving realistic budgets and overseeing the sound expectation of only those funds necessary. Now is not the time to increase taxes. All families are financially strapped, and it is understood that Gettysburg Area School District has been maintaining a reserve of almost twice the legal allowance. I ask you these two questions. What is being cut? What lists have you made of things that could be cut in our school district? Just to see, where could we cut? Has anybody asked a principal, a teacher, a custodian, anybody that works in a school, what areas of waste they see and what areas could be cut? I don't think so. Teachers are usually the last ones to be asked any kind of proposals like this. And I think it would be important to ask your teachers, what do you need? That's great. That should be asked every single meeting, every year. What is it you don't need? What is an extra that we've been giving you? Do you have too many textbooks? Do you not have enough textbooks? Do you have too many iPads? Do you not have enough iPads? Has anybody asked those questions? I, as a teacher, a retired teacher now, would like to see a list of proposed items that could be cut, programs. And I'll give you a very unpopular example. Several of the board members have talked about field trips. I'm assuming last year you didn't go on any field trips. Where did that money go that was supposed to be for field trips? I worked for a school system that we cut out all field trips. Kids didn't go on field trips. And especially with the kind of COVID year that we've had 2 years, those kids need to be in that classroom. And you can bring field trips to them. They don't have to go out. And I can guarantee you there are many museums around here that would love to come into the classroom and bring hands-on learning. So those are just some areas that you might want to consider. We thank you very much for your time. We thank you for all that you do for our Gettysburg schools. And I appreciate you allowing me to speak tonight. Thank you.
Finally, we have Victor Lombardi.
First, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And I hope to bring a little different perspective to the discussion, perhaps. We're new to the
Could
area.
you move a little closer to the microphone? Thank you.
We're new to the area. So we're just learning the ropes a little bit. But anecdotally, we were forewarned about the, shall we say, exorbitant educational tax burden. However, the wisdom reside here anyway at this time. However, I would be hard pressed to recommend a move to this location based on this tax situation. Number one. Number two, anecdotally, I've been told that this is almost a rubber stamp annual exercise of increases. And I ask who among you are representing the citizenry out here and the burden that we're under with the increased inflation, costs, etc. Many of us who have no children in the system, never had children in the system, and many of us who reside here now, 55 and over communities and so forth. Who among you is resisting these increases, is looking for these other opportunities that these previous speakers were able to present to you? Who is looking for these other options? That's the question. We're all elected. And I commend you all for your service, as the other speakers did. But I think the citizenry is getting a little tired. And I know I'm speaking as a newbie, but I think the citizenry that I'm hearing is getting a little tired of these rubber stamped, in their minds, arbitrary and regular increases. We need to look for where services can be amended, cut, replaced. We need to look, you need to look at this, as the other speaker said, I believe, as the average household who has to live within their means. Also, this is my first attendance, obviously, but to her point, it sounded to me like there were two unassigned funds. One of which is at your discretion, which is the $9.3 million, I believe she said. In addition to which, I believe the other unassigned is $6.2 million. Are you looking at those reserves? And to Mr. Stillwell's point, are they increasing each year? Why? And you're going to tax us when you don't even need the additional funds? That's what I'm hearing. And I don't know how accurate it is. I can't get into the weeds on the numbers. I think it would be nice if you had presented to the people the numbers that you were revealing, or made it visible to the people so that you could follow along. But in any case, perhaps you do in some way, I'm not aware. But simply I wanted to try and give you a little bit of perspective about the message that we could bring back to people that might be considering coming here as well. I assume you all live in the area, or maybe you don't. But if you do, you must know the cost of living. And I think it may be a state issue, but to tax wealthier jurisdictions more than other jurisdictions is not equitable. And I don't know if you have any input on that or whatever, but you shouldn't then rely on the citizenry to make up the difference. You must live within your means. That's my perspective on it. I commend you all for your service. I thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to adjourn the first portion of our meeting related to the budget for a 10-minute recess, and then we will start our regular scheduled meeting. We stand adjourned. Attention, we're about to start our regular meeting. Tim. Good evening again. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct the business of the Gettysburg Area School District. Public comment is welcome and issues will be referred to the appropriate board committee or administrator. Comments will be summarized in the official board minutes, which will be made available by contacting the business office. Please take a moment to silence your cell phone. Again, as everyone was present with the exception of Tim and Lynn. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just as a point of reference, immediately after tonight's board meeting will be a very brief administrative conference in reference to property. Dave, I'm assuming we do not have any citizens participation. That brings us to routine approvals. 5.1 through 5.5. May I have a motion?
Second.
Question?
Can I just make a statement?
Yes.
On the, human resources recommendations, you're asking for a 2.6% increase for acting free cash numbers, and while it's my understanding that I pretty much have to do that, it looks really bad that we're giving raises and raising taxes. And that's all I'm gonna say about it.
And just to address, I did have a conversation with our solicitor, because there was a question raised. And it's my understanding that while it may necessarily not be a complete contract, it is deemed as a contract that was done previously. And it's my understanding, Bob, that it's not even open for entertainment. Based upon past practices and case law, this is just how it is.
If you have an Act 93 compensation plan, during the period of the plan, whatever is in that plan must be followed. And there's an appellate court case right on point.
Kenny and I talked about it, so I know it just.
Right, and I think it
It
was,
just looks bad.
I think that was more for me to get it out in public, because there's been comments from the board here. There's comments from the public that go unanswered on a regular basis. And I want to make sure that when we walk out the door here, that we're not misrepresenting anything like the 27 credit cards that was mentioned last week. But I digress. Any different questions on routine approvals? Roll call. Jeremy?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Michelle?
Yes.
Amy Beth?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
I vote yes. Items for board action. 6.1, elect board treasurer. May I have a motion, please?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would like to nominate Tim Sigmund.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Additional nomination. Question. Roll call. Al,
Yes.
Mike. Yes. Michelle,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Amy Beth,
No.
Jeremy,
No.
Tim,
Yes.
I'll vote yes. 7.1, 345, school police officer, informational, Jason.
Those are there are three policies right in a row. Those are all policies that were reviewed at the policy committee meeting on Tuesday of last week. The first policy, 345, is a brand new policy for the district. The other two policies are either rewrites or edited policies, just based on recommendations from the solicitor from Atleos that's helping us through the school police process. So, three policies as you see them are in current draft based on solicitor's input, and the committee reviewed them. They are here for the board information tonight. We move to action on June 6th, and that's just part of laying the foundation for putting that work in place.
Any questions?
Yes, I have a question. So after that meeting and everyone had the chance to review, I guess, those proposed policy changes and outcomes, just a question to you, Dr. Perrin, would it help expedite things along further through the work and through the process if we were to make a motion to put this to action tonight, or is your timeline good?
Our timeline's good with a June approval, but appreciate the thought. So what we would likely do then in June, along with voting on these three policies, is we'll bring as an information item, because the board doesn't vote on them, we'll bring a job description on what that would look like. So then the three policies would be approved, the board will see and ask questions about the job description, and we'll be able to move forward with advertising and going through that process at that point.
Perfect, thank you. 7.2, policy 805, relations with law enforcement agencies, Jason.
Yeah, all three of,
So all three of them are all covered?
yeah, the first three. 217 is one that's different, and that's specific to graduation requirements. And Mr. Lusk will be here just to go across a couple of brief slides.
I'm gonna try my best to be as efficient with this explanation as possible. The conversation, I would say, it's always a conversation, what we do for kids, what that plan looks like. That's ongoing. I think that conversation, I'll say, intensified when we spent a lot of time working through Act 158 and how it applies to our graduating class of 2023. As we looked kid by kid to determine what their particular pathway to a diploma looked like, to make sure it made sense for each individual kid. So I'm just going to quickly look at the PA requirements. 4 English, 3 math, 3 science, 3 social studies. There's your core. 2 in the areas of arts and humanities, or both. 1 health and physical education credit, and then 5 elective credits, essentially. That's what the state requires. Moving on. To be a little more descriptive of that, goes on to say you need to have English every year. You need to have phys ed every year. So even though they only require 1 credit of health and physical education, they tell you it needs to happen in every year in high school. Talks about clock hours, 120 hours per course. Again, 4 English, 3 math, 3 science, 3 social studies, and a planned health course. And then everything else can fall into these categories, miscellaneous. So just kind of wanted to start with that. And then we'll take a look at the county. I think this chart is helpful to recognize what we do in comparison to our peers. If you look at English, because of the state requirement, everybody has a 4. Everybody, with the exception of Gettysburg Area High School, goes with the 3 and 3 for math and science. We require 3 with an extra credit required that you can choose, whether it's going to be math or science. We require 4 in social studies, as does Bermudian. Everybody else requires 3 as per the state requirement. 3 is the average in terms of health, PE, safety ed, which is driver's ed. You see a little less, a little more in a couple places, but 3 would be the average. We are the only school that right now has a freshman family and consumer science course that is required, which we'll come back to. Everybody is required to do a financial literacy course. We have a half credit of personal finance that's taken in the senior year. We'll talk a little bit about that. Humanities, fine arts, practical arts. As I said, we have 2. Note this, somehow, even though it's kind of specifically worded in what the state requires from Oxford, kind of moves everything down into a catch-all category. Makes it simple. I don't know if that's best, though, because that's actually written out in state language. We'll talk about that in a little bit, too. Everybody offers a similar number of electives, or requires, I should say, again, to Oxford. They've put them all in one shot there. We require a research course at this point, and also a careers course. Those tie together in our sophomore year, and we're going to take a look at that in a moment. And again, not too many else. No other schools do require those specific courses. We're the only ones. We're talking about some changes for a couple of reasons. One, ties into what we do on a daily basis. We're looking at our bell schedule. We want to build in a time, and we've had it in pockets right now. We do it every Wednesday and some Fridays. We have a resource time where we do intervention, we do enrichment, we do clubs, we do some Warrior Way related activities. We'd like to have that every day because consistency matters. We've had that in certain years. We haven't had it lately. It's helpful, which is why we'd like to get back to it. We'd like to try to simplify, and we'd like to maintain or increase options and really choice for kids so they can find a pathway to a diploma that really matches their strengths and interests. We're talking about moving from 9 required credits to 8 in a year to create a more manageable workload, and probably eliminate some unnecessary credits because you will have students say, like, I don't need this class anyways, which doesn't sound very motivating. So that's one reason, and there's a number of other reasons, but again, we're trying to be efficient. Back to 158, we want to make sure that everybody has a pathway to a diploma that makes sense. If you're not going to pass your Keystone exams, it would be best if you were in a career and technical education program. Otherwise, you're going to have to accumulate a number of pieces of evidence to check the box for Act 158. Moving on. This is what our requirements look like now, and we'll just go ahead and jump to the next sheet. This is what we would propose. We would keep the 4 English as we need to. We would go to a 3 for math, 3 for science, 3 for social studies, and then require 1 extra core wherever a student would choose. So that would become a 4 or that or that. So they could apply it to social studies, they could apply it to science, they could apply it to math. Slight change. We would eliminate the specific career and work course in a sophomore year and the research writing course because those skills we believe can be infused in other places. Not that they're not important, we just think that we can achieve them elsewhere. This has an asterisk because I'd like to just say generally students need 10 electives, but just because of the state language, we'll probably keep that specific language in, keep the 2, this would move to 8. If we take out the careers in the sophomore slot, we would change freshman facts. Again, we're the only one that does that in accounting. There's a little bit of family and consumer science, there's a little bit of self-exploration, there's a little bit of career exploration, there's a little bit of health. it's kind of an introduction to a lot of things that we do in high school. We would make it more of an advisory period with an emphasis on career exploration. Because it's our opinion that kids need to figure out their plan at the beginning of their high school experience. So many things that they can and should take advantage of at high school, which is really figuring out their plan. We'd like to coach them and work with them to figure that out as soon as possible in the freshman year. So that course would change and catch some of the content that would be eliminated. Safety ed would stay for now, but we'd like to change that curriculum a little bit. Health needs to stay, personal finance needs to stay, and then we'd have same number of total credits, mostly freeing up electives. What we're trying to do is free up a little space in a student's prescribed schedule so they can take a course load that speaks again to their passions and their interests. So just trying to create a little extra flexibility. We'd move to 32 total credits instead of 36 on average, going from 9 to 8. But again, really we're requiring 28. That's the short of it. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Mr. Lewis, I think you've already said this, but the thing that I think I like most, and I don't care, it's been my experience in over 4 decades in the field, that when people have some degree of choice and ownership, whether it be the core or the electives, allowing that kind of flexibility in people to choose certainly will hopefully increase motivation and maybe their work ethic.
Right, and absolutely agree with you. Back to this piece, you know, fine arts, we're talking about a lot of specific art classes, practical arts. That could be art in the form of pottery. It could be materials, more practical hands-on courses. Humanities, that could be a foreign language. That could be another social studies type of course. Vocational, I think we all know what that means. That kind of speaks to the need for some of that in everybody's education, which I don't disagree with. You know, it can't all be core, but again, freeing up flexibility for students to choose what makes sense for them and their future. That's what we're after.
Didn't you say that, I'm sorry, I'm not myself. Didn't you say that on the last slide where all the schools were there that New Oxford limited that on, but you didn't think that was right because they didn't define it and then you just took the same one out, so I was just trying to figure out why.
Sure, but I would put that back in. That line would be removed. I was saying, originally I kind of like the idea of that, but I think I would remove that line strike, keep that specific language in.
And then we go to 10 electives?
Yeah. They're essentially electives anyways.
True.
But it kind of specifies important electives, at least a sampling of certain things, which makes sense. We were just trying to simplify as much as possible, but again, just because of the state language and the fact that it makes sense, doesn't really change anything. We'll keep it in. If you have any other questions, shoot me an email, call me, ask away. Thanks for listening.
Board committee reports. Mike? I have nothing. Amy Beth? Tim?
I think we meet this Thursday.
It's on the calendar.
Program reports.
Yeah, I just wanted to give the board a quick update to let you know that we're still working on the additional alternative estimates to the facility projects that we were talking about. Several months ago, we had brought the design bid build estimates, and the board had asked for some alternative estimates, especially using the ESCO or GIZA process. So we're still working with that company and trying to get those as soon as we can.
Any additional?
I actually have something before we adjourn, I'd like to say. So as a board member and elected official, I obviously have thick skin, and I can take criticism and emails and accusations and people making comments they may not have the full scope of what they're talking about. But something I'm going to use my position on this board to say, something that frustrated me this evening, is when you have members of the public making public comment and accusing one of our employees of basically falsifying account balances after we were just audited, where every transaction is literally verified, is unacceptable, and I won't tolerate it. So she is an employee of this district, and I think people should be a little more respectful of what they say, and I think they should do a little more research before they speak.
Mike, I'm not gonna belabor that. I echoed that. I left it sit after the last board meeting with 27 credit cards. They're P cards. And Linda, I wish you'd had an opportunity, and I would have this opportunity to let you explain exactly what those cards are. We're audited. There's nothing fraudulent going on in this district, and any insinuation that's said or left out there is absolutely disgusting to me. Having said that, there's nothing further. We stand adjourned.